Okay, I think we're on. So, hello everyone. I appreciate you attending this week's webinar session on RPA. This week I'm pretty excited. We have Steve Moritz, who is going to be your moderator. So, good news for everybody who heard me do 4 webinars. You don't have to listen to me anymore. You get somebody much more intelligent. Me and Steve has worked together for 25 years. We first worked together at Capgemini, and which later became Sageti, and then through the years have worked together on multiple projects and engagement. Steve is one of the consultants that I consider, 5 best I've ever worked with, and so I'm looking forward to listening to his presentation as much as anybody else. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Steve. And Steve, look forward to hearing from you.
Hey, Tommy, thanks for the introduction. And, I obviously haven't taught you well about managing expectations. So I appreciate all those kind comments. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you on this webinar. I'm excited to cover a topic that's, I think, pretty critical. And the real tone of this presentation is how to do better, quite simply. With the work that we've done at Team International, we've encountered a number of clients who have found that RPA is very important to their business, yet they've struggled with the implementation for a number of reasons. And what we're going to walk you all through today is what I think is a pragmatic and really kind of grounded approach. We're going to stay away from a lot of kind of ether level 30,000 foot platitudes, but really, I hope, give you some tactical and pragmatic guidance about how you can rescue, improve, and enhance what you're doing today with your RPA initiatives. So as Tommy said before, I spent a good amount of time, and I really don't want to spend much time introducing myself, other than saying what I've really focused my career around is, digital transformation, cloud automation, and simply put, really helping businesses find ways to employ technology that really bring meaningful outcomes to the top or bottom line. But let's, more importantly, talk about, why are we here? Why are you here today? I hope that these 3 areas are going to resonate with you. But I want to start off with a quote. You'll see kind of seasoned throughout this presentation are quotes, because I think they kind of ground us in the content. But there's really a simple agenda. I'm sure you all probably have COVID fatigue. You can turn on the TV or listen to the radio without hearing about it, but obviously, it is an existential threat. It is no longer an event, more a secular issue that has to be dealt with. So we'll kind of relate as to why it's so critical right now. And with that said, we'll spend time, again, we're going to be very specific around 5 areas where we've seen our clients struggle and where we see kind of ideas to kind of rescue bot operations. And then we'll conclude with an approach that we've employed with a number of clients we call it a QuickStrike. Simply stated, it's a rapid way to get our arms around what are our clients doing, where might the weaknesses be, and give them some recommendations to move forward and improve ROI. But let's get right into the content. And again, I think, RPA is robotic process automation. I promise you, the slide says in 60 seconds or less. That's probably a reminder to me more so than anything, but I want to just really quickly ground us all on kind of what we mean by RPA and or bots. And simply, it's about saving cost, about saving money and time. All we're really doing with bots is replacing human interaction with computers with software, right? So basically, the bots run the same programs, they execute the same keystrokes, To some degree, they also can learn, and we'll talk a little bit about that, replicating human behavior. We'll talk also about how you find the best processes, but clearly repetitive tasks are the sweet spot for bots. And what we find, whether it's in finance processes, HR, customer service, there are always going to be exceptions, situations that don't fit the bot model, and that's okay and that's expected. But what we really look for, or where we can employ automation to address what might be 80, 85, 90% of the processes, and therefore the exceptions are the minimum. And as I mentioned before, this is software. And so like any other software, it isn't necessarily a set it and forget it kind of thing. And we'll talk later about ensuring that the bots can perform, operate, and scale, but you have to look at it that way. Now, why is it so important? Regardless of your industry, it's important because your competitors, I'm very sure, are implementing bots, which means they are maybe improving customer service, going real time, operating 24/7. They could be employing bots for internal, it could be supply chain functions, and they're taking cost out of their business. And so therefore the growth numbers are significant, double-digit growth. If you have an opportunity to use this technology and take 30% of your costs out, and you can't successfully do that, but your competitors are, that's really difficult to overcome. So that's why it's important. And we not only see this anymore for kind of internal or back office, but we see bots meeting, especially in a pandemic, a customer expectation that they can get real-time response to their inquiries. So that's why this is important. Now, let's maybe flip a little bit to the negative and talk about the realities, though, right? So if you look at the vendor websites, there are all kinds of platitudes and success stories, and they're all obviously real, but things are not necessarily as rosy and or as easy as the vendors may make them out to be. Albert Einstein recognizes that everybody is going to make a mistake at some point. Another quote, although it's not on here, that I really like, and I think it's Wayne Gretzky or maybe it's Michael Jordan. But what I like about it is it says is you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So even though we're going to talk about the failures and the problems in bot deployment, the reality is I think for most businesses going down this path and finding ways to automate processes, it's a must. It's critical to your business or your operational survival. So a couple data points to kind of reinforce and hopefully cement you to remain on this webinar for the next 40 minutes or so. It's that, and I won't, of course, read any of the content to you, but projects are failing. And it for a number of reasons. And E&Y has a study saying maybe 30 to 50% of projects fail. Forbes has kind of weighed in, talking about management failures. And again, you have other studies from senior executives, and again, around 40% talking about just unfulfilled expectations, projects that aren't getting implemented. So let's kind of peel back the onion a little bit, and I want to kind of amplify why these things might be happening. But before we do that, let's also just kind of bring this into the lens of what's going on today. And what we've seen in Team International's world is, partly driven by or catalyzed by the pandemic. More and more companies have to find flexible, scalable automation. So let's kind of look at why. The WHO has a pretty draconian perspective on the pandemic. and its impact on the global workforce, talking about billions of people negatively affected. But why you need to get this right is, we'll go through quickly as far as these elements. So many companies are struggling with from a top line. Look, everyone's heard about the wonderful things that have happened to stocks like Zoom and Snowflake, and even companies like Peloton, right, that are selling home fitness equipment. But the reality is that for many traditional companies, and again, everybody's got the bright lights on restaurants and bars and entertainment, but revenue is being constrained across virtually every industry. And so to remain viable, you got to find a way to cut costs. And you got to find a way to cut a lot of costs, because in many industries, revenues are really down. The other element is there are specific COVID-related processes now. And it may have to do with checking your facilities, managing capacity, and plus, because no one anticipated us to be talking still in December 2020 about quarantines and stay-at-home orders. So, when you think about a human being performing a job, they're there every day. But you don't know that maybe your process volumes are going to triple. What do you do with that? Are you going to go find 2 more people? But in the world of bots, you can scale those up. And for the most part, scaling a bot up to handle 3 times the volume of processes doesn't necessarily cost you anything. Customer expectations have changed. People aren't able to go into brick and mortar anymore for customer service inquiries, certainly for e-commerce, for follow-up support. So how are you going to move all that customer interaction when your customers can't see your people anymore? And what we're seeing is that for a lot of our clients, the answer is bots. And then again, many of both IT and business leaders are looking for low-hanging fruit. They're not trying, if you look at the above 3 issues, they're not interested in finding a solution that's 12 months, 18 months out. They need solutions that are going to be operational in weeks. And again, another positive element on the RPA front is the tool vendors are great. Their platforms are great. We'll talk a bit later about Team International's their capacity and the catalog of bots that already exist. So when we say low-hanging fruit, kind of to decode that really means being able to deliver these projects in weeks, not months and years. And bots lend themselves well to that. So let's look at some very specific processes that are being automated because of the pandemic. And I'll run through this really quickly so we can start getting to kind of the 5 issues and kind of the remediation. So certainly, again, you turn on the television, you see this just really challenging videos and photos of what the health professionals have to confront. And so staffing, managing all the volunteers, pre-screening, looking at the employee health tracking, infection tracking, contact tracing. What we're seeing is a lot of our clients in health systems are employing bots to manage what we're hoping is a once in a lifetime volume. But basically, they're not at a place right now where they can go hire hundreds of folks to manage all these processes, because again, these volumes hopefully aren't going to be around for years and years, but moreover, they don't have the top line anymore to support this. In the financial services industry, loan forgiveness, forbearance, we've done some amazing bot processes around CARES and LEAP funding, around grant processing. So clearly there's a heightened volume of transactions running through the financial services world because of the pandemic. In the logistics and airline industry, people are changing their plans. The airlines are changing their rules virtually every day about processing refunds, reservations, their reservation systems. They're selling middle seats. They're not selling middle seats. They have to support contact tracing processes now, and we're seeing bots handle a major share of that. And then within any organization, there are a rising tide of HR processes for FMLA processing, for other HR related issues, for furloughs, for onboarding, for offboarding employees. And so that's another area that, again, has seen heightened demand, and bots are filling the gap there. So let's look at kind of the 5 areas. And this is where we're going to drill down. So we spent about 10, 15 minutes on the setup, but we're going to kind of go through quickly each of these 5 areas. So I won't dwell on each of these at this point, but bottom line is we think there are kind of 5 areas, and getting your bots right doesn't have to be a bridge too far. For each of these, we're going to kind of talk about what we see as kind of the problem, how we've seen the problem addressed, and then kind of give you a case study or an example, so that kind of bring some meaning to each of these, and we're kind of not operating just at the theory level. So I will apologize in advance for what might be a just ridiculously complex slide here, but let me try to distill and simplify. But let me start first with why process selection is kind of failure number 1, and it may even be the most the failure that we see occurring more often than any others. And the simple definition of why this is a problem is automating the wrong process, or thinking that a bot is going to maybe rationalize, normalize, or improve what might be bad process, or maybe even worse yet, process inconsistency, is a fallacy. But following this methodology, and it's a simple one, even though the graphic may not necessarily make you feel that way, and we run our clients through a workshop, typically in a couple hours, half day, where we run them through this process. And the good thing is, if you look at the table at the lower left, we're very quickly able to distill and run a lot of processes through this prism and get down to a sequencing of what are the best bots and in what order should they be executed. But simply, as I kind of go left to right, and again, I'll try to kind of abstract you from some of the complexity. We're really looking to validate certain process attributes, such as, is it today highly manual, highly repetitive, and is the process based on rules that are codified? Or maybe if they're not, they are at least today in somebody's head, and they're fairly consistent. We have to make sure we're dealing, of course, with digits, zeros and ones. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean we can't be talking about processes that are maybe handling language, because we do have NLP, or natural language processing algorithms, as well as images. And we have ability to take via OCR tools certain images, and the bots can actually look at a document and make a determination as to, well, what is this? If it's an invoice, what's in an invoice for? Is it a rental car bill? Is it an airline ticket? If in healthcare, is it a telemetry strip, or is it a doctor's note? So we're looking for electronic inputs and standards, right? So, the kinds of documents and information that flow in and out of processes have to be fairly standardized, a fairly consistent processing model, so meaning low exception rates, and of course, high volumes, right? Of course, we don't want to build a $50,000 bot, so that's applicable to a process that happens, once a week. So those are really kind of the rules in terms of kind of the workshop and the way we help our clients filter and determine their optimum use cases for bots. So again, I want to run quickly through these case studies, but I do think they bring some life and amplify some of the points we made before. So we were working with a very large regional health system, owned about 7 hospitals. They wanted to get moving with RPA. They especially had an issue around HIM, or health information management. So again, long story somewhat short, we kind of walked them through some of the material, candidly, that we're showing today. We got them to understand bot potential, and they put around the table around 6 executives from different departments in health information management. By the end of the day, we had identified around 15 different use cases. We kind of ran them through the different evaluation criteria. And then we kind of went away for a couple of days, and then we came back and we put timelines, level of effort around every one of the ideas. We sequenced and prioritized them. Bottom line, that then became their roadmap. We knew exactly where they wanted us to go. We started off with 2 different bots. The outcomes were we were able to dramatically automate something called certification of records. Also, we automated a process of attaching documents into electronic medical records, and built a bot, after we did the sequencing workshop. And again, I won't read the numbers to you. You can read them yourselves, but it really drove a major ability to transition resources from activities that really had nothing to do with customer care, patient care, or revenue cycle. And those resources were able to be redeployed. And, the real, success here was by bringing to them this methodology and this structure, this best practice, and doing that in a half a day. It really set the table and got leadership aligned as to, how to begin determining priorities and sequencing. And it got them also excited, and they knew that the first two projects that we were doing with them were actually the right ones. So it really had a good outcome. So next, I'm going to move into kind of the second failure, which is the notion of architecture. It's just interesting. I've given this presentation before. I didn't realize it, but Mike Tyson actually fought this weekend. So pretty timely to have a Mike Tyson quote. But everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And the point here is, when you implement a bot or a series of bots, it's no different than maybe the major investment you make when you implement ERP software or CRM software, or when you build a custom application. And when you do those kinds of enterprise level projects, you have to seriously consider and design and build and execute an intelligent architecture. So let's break that down real quickly. What do we mean by that? So, having backup processes, and it may not just be for the bot, but it could be for all the associated systems that the bot is working with. Again, for a lot of our clients, we see them running bots 24/7. They may be critical because customer service expectations are 24/7. You're a global company, so there is no sunset. There's sun, and so having an architecture that's reflective of the business need and the SLAs is critical. And you may have to design a high availability architecture. Managing the deployment of the bots from test to production, and deployment is complicated in the sense that, bots are interacting often with a lot of other systems. So the deployment process is critical, not just to get it right when you initially deploy it, but keeping it alive and keeping it functioning. And so therefore, having monitoring and alert systems in place. Now, a lot of the platform vendors have good tools, but ensuring, though, that those tools are integrated in an overall monitor and alert program that you must have. And compliance and security is, again, critical. Bots operating within the EU, we have to have considerations around GDPR. Clearly, in healthcare, we have to ensure that the architecture addresses HIPAA or PHI, financial services, PCI. And then ensuring that you have the right infrastructure and hardware in place. We often see bots being deployed in cloud environments, but for example, you may have customer service transactions that are highly seasonal. You may have those in, say, financial services where you've got reporting and end of month close process. And so, understanding what those volumes are, predicting those, and ensuring that you have the kind of scalable, flexible, maybe containerized infrastructures and critical. So because bot projects sometimes only take weeks, we often see this as a failure, that clients don't see the kind of criticality of addressing, defining, and implementing architecture with this kind of robust model. So, we've got kind of a checklist and kind of a reference architecture for how you do that. So again, quick study. We were working with a high-tech company in Silicon Valley, and they made a major investment, and the bots were really critical to a number of their internal finance processes, and they kept failing, quite simply. And the business leadership was kind of on the brink of just pulling the plug, and our client really struggled for why these bots were failing as they were. So we did kind of reviewed a kind of a technical architecture checklist. So it's kind of a compendium of all of our best practices, the things we've seen done well, the things you really have to think about, a drill down, if you will, from the prior slide. We walked them through that. We did a workshop on kind of optimum RPA architecture. We identified a number of gaps. And again, we focused on being pragmatic and proactive, and we identified a number of remediation activities cutting across kind of the infrastructure they had in place and improving the scalability, as well as making changes across the software. That enabled us to then kind of refactor their production architecture. We put the fixes in place for some of the key areas that were missing in terms of configuration management. We actually built some bots to improve configuration management and monitoring, and simply stated, kind of move them into a much more apt architecture to handle high availability. Again, I won't read the numbers to you, but generally speaking, the outcome was better consistency. They then were able to increase their velocity, meaning be able to introduce a lot more bots into this architecture without seeing continued failure, and it really increased confidence across the organization. So now we're on number 3. And, again, bots are an RPA. At the end of the day, it's software, but it's a little bit of a different animal, and so it kind of deserves its own methodology. And again, when we start working with clients, we many times we find that they have built a number of bots in the organization, but then they're struggling, and we say, well, let's go through your bot development methodology and maintenance, and they kind of look at us, and say, well, what do you mean? Like we either we don't have a methodology, or we're using the agile methodology that we just used for this 9-month ERP project. And we say, well, I think we need to kind of work with you to kind of create something specific to the beast. Love this quote, right? Big problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place, right? The problem often is, well, we know how to build software here at XYZ Corp, so we know how to do bots. Well, that really, in many cases, isn't the case. So we have, I think, a really good approach with time-tested deliverables, whether it's the business process documentation, how you develop the right level of technical documentation. From the start, introducing and defining your best practices, building into the approach your velocity plan, where possible, creating and leveraging bot inventory, and then how you do user acceptance testing. Now, one other thing I also mentioned about methodology is there are now a number of really powerful tools that automate the methodology for building bots. So it's really about bringing automation to the process of automation. And we find those tools, and again, I will not make this webinar a symposium on that. We do have an upcoming webinar in January. We'll be talking a lot more about hyper automation or intelligent automation. But I want to stress for all of you today, please follow up with us if you want to learn about some of the platforms that we've used that help automate the development of bots. And that's where this methodology can be implemented and automated. One other point I want to mention here is when you look at the circular arrows in the middle, right? The reality of bots, maybe even more so than a number of other software projects, is that processes, application, data environments are very fluid. Now, a lot of times, let me give an example. So in, say, mortgage banking and loan origination, you may have, we've built a bot that does a lot of the front end underwriting and underwriting processing. Now, that bot is going out to a number of external sources, validating a borrower's information. So it can be, credit scores, other sources of information. And so those third-party apps, they quite simply can be websites. Now, all of those environments, be they internal or external, are fluid, and they change, and the data structures change. The security mechanisms change. You find applications that don't have multi-factor authentication when the bot is built, and then after the bot is built, the vendor or even internally the security office puts MFA in place. So baking into your methodology the ability to constantly evolve that bot is a critical element to avoid this failure. That makes sense. Quick case study: a large financial services actually company. We're having a big challenge around their methodology because they didn't have one, and so we work with them to, we started with a checklist. I mean, you'll see a standard pattern here, where, well, again, we don't want to talk about theory. We talk about best practices. We get a client to review. We go through a checklist with them. We look at, their self-assessment, and then we held a workshop. Again, in a very short period of time, we fleshed out where they had failures and gaps, things that they had forgot about in their bot development methodology. We built a 2B model. We then put that in place, and then we applied that against 5 projects, 5 specific new projects. And what they found, and what we were happy to report, is that really all the measurements of how the bots were working once they got into production, the number of defects, the velocity that they were able to achieve, all of those metrics kind of went up because they started doing things right. I'm going to move now quickly into resources. Another, I guess, sports quote, talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence wins championships. The first question I would ever ask any new client when they came to us and said, we're kind of struggling with our resources, or, this isn't working well. And I'd say, well, let's talk about who do you have involved today in bot development? And that often is a question that reveals failure number 4, because there's a kind of it seems like a constant debate and battle as far as who owns bots. And the reality is, or what we believe, of course, is it has to be a strong collaboration between the business and the IT leadership. Now, we think it's critical that business be driving the prioritization, and clearly they're critical to being the subject matter experts on the process. But if you think about the architecture slide and the methodology slide, you'll realize the actual ownership and the care and feeding of bots has to be the province of IT, because it is software, it is binary code, and it breaks and it needs to be fixed, and it has to be run on architecture that can scale, that has to be secure. So questions we work with our clients when we're helping them on their resource model is, how are you pulling together the business, the IP, the IT, and RPA teams if you have them, right? And if you've heard the acronym RACI, which stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consulted, and Informed, we think it's critical right up front for all RPA projects for there to be a RACI defined. And a basic organization structure for any bot project has to have someone who's performing architecture responsibilities, because again, we already talked about the criticality of architecture. IT can't do this without business. And it's not just the business analyst telling us what the process is. What we often find and have to confront is process inconsistency. And we find this in a lot of organizations, big and small, whether it's how you're going to handle accounts payable or how you're going to handle employee offboarding. And so there often has to be the business SME, business analysts, that are not just documenting and tracking the processes, but reconciling the variability. And we have to come up with a model and a best practice. I would never suggest that a client that says, well, we kind of do this 6 different ways. So do you build 6 bots, or do you kind of force the business to reconcile and create one harmonized, optimized best practice? And I think you do that, and then you build one bot. So you need the business analyst to do that. Of course, you need the automation, the RP automation experts. The platforms are really good, and they have I won't get into the pluses and minuses of UiPath versus Blue Prism versus Automation Anywhere, but for the most part, they have consoles, designer consoles, operational consoles, but these tools are not easy. Go look on their websites and explore their training methodologies or training approaches. This isn't just attend for a couple hours and you're good to go. So you have to have experts. Now, that doesn't mean you can't take a Java programmer or a .NET programmer and turn them into RPA automation experts. But this is a different platform requiring different skills. And along those lines, again, you have to have people who know how to do the configuration, the production rollover, and the management of the bots, because they are fluid, and it is not a set it and forget it. You need a program manager to drive it, and clearly the right kind of SMEs, and sometimes at the executive level, especially when you have to create kind of a reconciliation of diverse processes. So let's talk about a case study. This is a large logistics organization really struggling with getting the right people and organization in place. They had not really had any clarity in terms of their RACI, and what they were finding is that basically they were not hitting their ROI targets. So again, we started with a checklist that helped them understand the critical roles in an optimized organization to deliver RPA services, coached them through that checklist, really kind of got at the understanding, did root cause analysis to understand the projects they had done and how they did them or how they really didn't do them, where they were failing in terms of their organizational structure, and then, where they kind of actually, then we kind of built them the 2B, right? The future, laid down kind of a model for their RACI, helped them implement that, gave them role descriptions, and then helped them take that and put that in place for a number of new projects. And we kind of, again, as you probably see for a number of these case studies, even if we're talking about architecture or methodology, or in this case, finding the right kind of resource model, what we tend to not want to do is just leave our clients with paper, like, hey, here's a PowerPoint, good luck. But we do that, and then we actually put that into practice, and we work the recommendations in all of these areas collaboratively and help them see them through to develop bots, which is why when you look at the outcomes, what you see in these examples is, the outcome isn't, hey, we gave them a 20-page PowerPoint document. The outcome is we then actually help them put that into practice and institutionalize that recommendation. And therefore you see, in this case, higher velocity, better ROI, and reduced defects. So let's go to the last one. And this sounds a little fluffy, but let me try to not make it fluffy, right? I love Jack Welch, who was running GE when GE was a juggernaut and not trading at like $5 a share as it is now. But good business leaders create vision. They own it, and they are relentless about seeing it through to completion. So my question to any of you on this call is, if you're doing RPA, is there someone who is the figurehead, who is the throat to choke, the tip of the spear, use whatever metaphor you like, and does that person have kind of an elevator pitch when it comes to the RPA strategy for your organization? If not, that's a problem. So, we also find, again, when we talk about the failure here of, you've got different parts of the organization doing RPA in different ways. Maybe you've heard the term shadow IT. What we find, and this isn't solely confined to RPA, is that in a lot of organizations, if certain parts of the business get frustrated with IT, they tend to then try to do things on their own. That typically doesn't work out well. And so, we certainly want to ensure that you don't have RPA silos. Another failure when we talk about vision is that this often RPA initiatives arise out of the finance department. So the CFO is driving it. So she may say, look, let's just, let's get moving on how we're going to do three-way matching, between PO, invoice, and receipt documents. But nobody, and let's just say you do all those great things we recommended today and it goes really well. So then they're like, okay, now let's go look at the AP processes. But no one is having a conversation with the head of customer service or talking to HR or working at the plant level to think about where you can bring some of this to complement manufacturing processes. One other thing too, I would challenge you, for any of you that are doing bots, how would you define your 5 W's? Put it on paper. Why are we doing it? Where are we doing it? What are we actually doing? When are we going to do it? Who's going to do it, right? I know that sounds very elementary, right? Very pedestrian to actually have to put that down on paper. But I think you need to have a bot vision defined. You have to answer those questions. And then you've got to socialize that across IT, across all the different business areas. And I think what you're going to find is you're going to find a lot of happy or eager customers. Unlike a lot of software projects, RPA actually does lend itself well to defined KPIs or ROI. And let me be very, very candid. Automation of processes that are historically undertaken by people that then are transitioned to computers is where the ROI exists. Now, whether that is what you use to reduce your workforce, or we enjoy, honestly, better when you're redeploying resources from those that aren't all that constructive or valuable in the overall enterprise to those that are, right? That's what it's about. So as I mentioned before, we gave an example about a health system that was able to take, I think if you added up the 2 bots, somewhere around 40 people and move them into something called revenue cycle. Well, in health systems, especially today, rev cycle is critical. That's about collecting money. So that's powerful, and define those kinds of KPIs in your vision. And, often the clients we work with aren't good at sales and marketing. and I know this may sound a little cliched, but we like to see our clients define their RPA program and do it again in an honest way, but then especially after you've had some success, take that success, evangelize it across the organization. And what you'll typically find is you have you will develop a backlog, you'll develop a pipeline very quickly. So those are the 5. Quick case study, pharma really had no vision. They had done some stuff, about 10 of them, but it was like all over the place. And so again, we started with a checklist. They ran through an assessment. We helped them develop the 5 W's. We really locked down and worked with them on all the metrics to really ensure that future programs, had ROI defined. We went through that with leadership. And then what that eventually led to is an expanding funnel of projects. And so in this particular example, where they had kind of a smattering of efforts across a couple departments, 10 bots had been done over about a year, it was about a 3-fold increase in demand. We sequenced all that, if you remember the process selection recommendations, and they ended up with, a substantial program. They were able to staff it because it had well-defined ROIs for each of these. And it just became kind of a major initiative that really had transcendental impact on the company's financials. So recycling turns things into other things, right? That's like magic. And the essence of this slide, so we're kind of beyond the 5 best practices. But if you remember in methodology, we had a comment about leveraging catalogs. And the point to be made here is that Team International, who has developed bots in a number of industries, and again, I don't want this just to be a commercial for the catalog that Team International has built. The importance here is if you are in any of these industries and you, of course, you then have these processes to tackle. The development of a bot for you in any of these is going to be greatly aided, and the time and effort will be compressed if you start with code that's already been built. Now, the code may have built in one platform and you want to do it in another platform, but it still will have an accelerant effect for sure. So, as you work with, if you choose to work with outside consultancies, you really want to probe and work with ones, of course, that have skills around these 5 best practices, that have skills in the platform that you've chosen, if you have a preference or if you have chosen. And the third, I think, criteria you should be looking for is a company that has the experience and has cataloged enough of these that they can be brought to bear and enable a faster, quite candidly, less costly approach for your own bots. So I want to leave a little time for questions. I also want to mention the Team International QuickStrike. And this is a program, and it, as the name implies, we do this on a real rapid basis. And we work with both business and IT leaders, and we kind of take a number of the principles and practices that you've seen in the last 40 so minutes, and we kind of help them figure out where do you start, what kind of methodology do you need to put in place, how can you really get the architecture designed to accommodate your business and the bots. What type of resource model do you need to have in place? And so we kind of, take and concentrate a lot of these concepts and bring that to bear in a very rapid period of time. The way we work it is, I mentioned today some of the checklists, so we kind of have an abbreviated version of that. We do kind of a pre-workshop questionnaire, and then we make sure that we get the right agenda. We hold a workshop where in some cases the client may want us to do a lot of education on RPA. some education on all these best practices. We kind of walk our client through all of this, but really where we really find the greatest value, because our clients tell us this, is we spend a lot of time around process selection and really help them kind of get off the dime as far as where do we start, how do we get moving. What we find for a lot of our clients is this just lets them mobilize, get organized, really concentrated, and we work this QuickStrike both for clients that haven't even really started on their bot journey, and we equally probably find it valuable for clients who have, but aren't necessarily enamored with the results that they've received so far. So I'll leave it to Tommy at the end and others as far as how you contact Team International if you're interested in this QuickStrike. Ted, any questions?
Steven, no questions for this moment.
Okay. So Tommy, do you want to talk about the next set of webinars, or how to reach you as it relates to the QuickStrike?
Yeah, so very quickly, so we have a set of webinars for December, and then we're going to go into January with a new set coming up. So in 1217, we're going to talk about practical use cases, examples for healthcare. We're going to show some actual demos of some of the solutions that we built for healthcare, and make it kind of exclusive for all of our healthcare customers to see what some of the new things that we're doing. And then maintaining patient history using RPA and ML as a very detailed proposal. I think those are actually reversed. But on the 10th, we'll talk about the patient history using RPA and ML, kind of show how RPA and machine language can be combined together to create more advanced solutions. And then we're going to go into January. In January, we're going to get really into some of the stuff that I want to get into, which is the artificial intelligence, business rules engines, how you can start using really kind of the evolution of analytics to AI to business rules engines to create comprehensive solutions that are both intelligent and accurate. And then at the end of January, we're going to show we're going to partner with K2, which is now Nintex. If you know who K2 is, you know that they just merged with Nintex. We're going to do 2 webinars with them. One that is going to show a scheduling solution that we built for about 5,000 doctors and nurses. So it's a dynamic scheduling engine using RPA, K2. And then the last one that we're going to do in the month is going to be basically an imaging solution that Steve mentioned today that we did for a healthcare client that we have extended out to actually show some workflows, not just the OCR and the AI learning the OCR, but then how you can kick workflows off, different workflows depending on the different types of documents. So that will be the last session in January. So I'm pretty excited about those. I think they get into really good use cases that most of our clients are pretty excited about, and looking forward to those topics. As far as getting in touch with us, you can reach out to me. Certainly, Steve, you can reach out to. Steve, can you flip, or can we flip to the next slide real quick?
Yeah.
And so my email is tommy.simon@Team International. Samir Ospina is our RPA Global Lead. You can also reach out to him. A very good guy if you've had a chance to work with. And then Valentina is our product manager on our catalogs that Steve mentioned. If you're interested in figuring out if we have an industry catalog or a functional catalog that would help you, Valentina is our product manager, and you can reach out to her as well. So I appreciate Steve. You always do a good job. I always enjoy this. We will get this out to all the participants, the PDF of this presentation out to everyone. If anyone has questions, let us know. And Steve, again, appreciate you coming in and always doing a great job.
Hey, my pleasure. And thank you, everyone. I hope you felt the last 56 minutes had a good ROI on it. As you can probably tell, Tommy and his team are very passionate about this. RPA is exciting because it is so critical right now. And it's the kind of technology where we really see powerful results implemented really quickly. So we'd certainly love to talk to you about how to help you in either of those regards. And I thank you again for your time and hope you have a good afternoon or evening. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.